This is the 33rd episode of the Effective Executive podcast and YouTube video. And this week, I have come across, as I do most weeks, what everybody seems to focus on as an executive. How do I get the right leadership attributes? So, uh, Simon Sinek, uh, leaders eat last. Well, I'm going to add in there, leaders eat last, but you still need food. And I would submit to most executives that they typically don't eat last. um, for the most part, what winds up happening when push comes to shove and there has to be rifts, reductions in force in your organization, the first people to go are not the leaders, or is there rarely any sacrifice done. So it rings a little hollow with me whenever I read that. And I know his book goes well beyond that, but my whole focus is, as I've talked about before, is not on leadership traits, but really on methods to help you grow your organization and making a place where people want to belong, a place where people want to belong to. And there's these are different skill sets completely. Um, and the leader attributes, I mean, there is so much information out on the internet as I've researched this over the years. Sometimes it's the top five leadership attributes you need to have, and sometimes it's the top eight, and it's the 15, and there's 22, and it just goes on and on. But there are typically a lot of the same things. So the leadership attributes that are most talked about are, clarity, being decisive, having courage, having passion, having humility, vision, focus, empathy, the ability to motivate, active listening, and communication. Those come up the most often. Now, you may have other ones that you think are more important, and that's fine. But none of these help you grow your business and make it a place where people, want to interact with, both customers and employees. Now, I would you would rightly argue, yeah, I mean, if you show lots of empathy and you have passion and all these, some of the things that I just listed there, you'll say, well, that's what makes it a great place to work. And yes, you do need to have those things, but they completely miss the other half of the equation. And to me, even the more important path, which is, do you have a method or methods within your organization to achieve growth in the business and making it a place that people want to interact with, and again, employees and customers. And when I walk into these places, the answer is typically no. And the first step is developing your synthetic thinking skills, your ability to look at the whole of the system through a customer lens. If you're going to be empathetic, you ought to know what the customer is saying about your organization. I just went through a whole thing this week with a number of different organizations, and talking with executives and personally. I mean, the lawn company that comes out and it's supposed to aerate my lawn came out, did its aeration, and then left. But the whole side yard had not been done, so I had to call up and say, hey, you didn't finish this. And, oh, well, they misunderstood the work order, and that was after a phone call where I had to call up because the guy that was putting down some fertilizer was supposed to put down weed control also. And I had to go back and forth between the company and just basically say, you're supposed to put both down before we do the overseed and the aeration. The first two interactions I have with this company, I've had to call them up because their work orders were wrong or there's something wrong with it. they're oblivious. They have no idea that anything. Well, thank you for calling, and yeah, we're glad you called up because boy, that work order was wrong. I shouldn't have to call. It's ridiculous. So this is why I need, as an executive, you need to know what's going on in your organization, what's actually happening from a customer perspective, and you can't get it from a survey. I filled out a survey this week from a company. It took 3 weeks to open an account with. I gave them a 1 on everything. Nobody called. Nobody has, contacted me to say, boy, we want to try and fix what's going wrong here. It's just like, okay, so what do you do with this information if it's in a survey? So being involved as an executive and going to look through the customer lens as they see your organization has to be a priority for any executive. If you're, if it's something you don't want to do, then you really shouldn't be an executive, in my opinion. I mean, you've got to understand what's happening in your organization in those interactions with the customer in your organization. There's no substitute. You can't get it off a spreadsheet. You're not going to get it off a survey. You have to go and really see or listen to what the customer is saying. And then the other component, and it's funny, a couple of the attributes that we talked about were motivation, and that's a huge one, and how your organization thinks and controls the things that are happening in the organization, which is the other component that executives, it's not an attribute, but it's everyone. It's an attribute that every executive has. They want to control the work. I shouldn't say every. Most executives have is they want the ability to control the work in some manner. They do that sometimes through motivation. They do that sometimes through micromanagement. And these are things that make your organization intolerable to work for or to interact with, because you aren't seeing what that thinking is doing within your organization. So what are their methods? Well, if you get better at decision making, or at least going into it, it's not just the making of the decision, as I've said many, many times before. It's the ability to pivot off of your decision, understand what the problems are with your decision making process. The second thing is innovation. Constantly having new products and services and thinking and so forth within your organization is going to make it exciting for both employees and customers to want to be able to interact with your organization. What's new? What are they working on now? I mean, isn't that what we're doing with Elon Musk every time, SpaceX? And I mean, he just goes on and on and on. And people are mesmerized by that. Being proactive in developing new products and services and ideas for your organization makes it something exciting that people want to be a part of. The third thing is executive data analytics. Having a method for taking data to useful knowledge. And most of the data that people are managing their organizations with have to do with the motivation and controlling aspects of what's going on. And unfortunately, too often, not the things that matter to customers. And so the data that they're collecting is the wrong data, or the data are the wrong data, because the data is plural, the word data. So it's a matter of getting data that can help you learn and having a tool to do it, which I've talked about in previous YouTube video. Now, organizational design is another thing. Is your organization set up to be able to handle what the customer throws at you? Because they'll throw a lot of different things at your organization, and if you can't handle it based on the fact that this department handles it, and they call the customer service, and the salesperson didn't write it up right. I don't care as a customer. I just want it correct. I don't want to have to pick up the phone every time and spend 30 minutes on the phone straightening out something that you should have done correctly at the beginning. So, and people may say, well, why are you lamenting over lawn care? Because, well, I expect as a customer for me not to have to be involved in everything. I expect that once I've explain what I need for my yard, that you're going to ask the right questions, and then I can leave that. I won't have to call up each time you come out and say, well, you didn't do this or you didn't do that. It's aggravating. You think they're going to get a referral from me? No way. So, yet they're advertising, they put they've got mailers out and they've got this, but the one thing that they could be successful with is making it an organization that I want to interact with. So these are the things that are happening in your organization, and they happen every day. And to what degree, I don't know, but that's why leaders eat last, and leadership attributes. They're important. I'm not denying that. Yes, it's important to have courage and passion, humility and empathy and all those things. But you better be able to have an organization that people want to interact with, and that you are growing it organically in your organization. And when I say organic, I'm not talking about buying another organization or something like that. I've been a part of many of those types of things over the years. But if you can grow your business through innovation and good design of your organization that both employees and customers want to interact with, you're going to be way ahead of the game.